today, and we're going on a seriously fascinating journey. We're looking at how ancient oral traditions basically built human identity from the ground up. So picture this. You're sitting in your living room right now, completely insulated from the wild. The lights are on. Now wipe that away. Transport your mind back thousands of years to a time when humanity huddled around a flickering fire under a vast, pitch-black sky. The stories shared in that firelight, they weren't just for entertainment. They were literally the glue holding those early societies together. They were our original survival manuals. So that brings us to, honestly, the most fundamental question about our shared history around that global campfire. Why do we tell stories? I mean, it seems like a simple question on the surface, right? We tell them to pass the time. But the actual answer reveals so much about our deep psychological makeup and this desperate innate need we have to connect with one another. Long before written language was even a thing, storytelling was the primary technology we invented to map out a chaotic world and to figure out our place in it. The author Madeleine L'Engle actually hit the nail on the head here. She noted that stories are the common ground that let us see through the eyes of others. And man, that brilliantly captures the heart of the matter. Early stories were our very first tools for teaching empathy. Think about it. For early tribal humans, stepping outside of your isolated, localized little bubble wasn't just a nice thing to do. It was absolutely essential for coexistence and trade. Stories let our ancestors grasp abstract virtues and truly understand completely different perspectives, effectively bridging the perilous gaps between different customs and cementing our shared human emotions. Just imagine those early storytellers weaving these tales and passing them down orally from generation to generation. This whole global campfire tradition does some incredibly heavy lifting for society. Take the simple bedtime ritual, for instance. It reinforces that intimate parent-child relationship, but it also creates a totally safe space to introduce some darker, more terrifying subjects. Like if there are real predators out in the woods, a story about a monstrous wolf helps a child safely process that fear. Through these captivating narratives, we teach abstract concepts like altruism and self-control, pass down critical societal values, and ultimately shape the early regional identities that define exactly who we are. Now, to really wrap our heads around this, we have to look at the staggering preservation of African folktales. We are talking about a tradition of immense, monumental scale here. There are over 7,000 highly sophisticated narratives documented in print alone, and countless more still living purely in the spoken word across the continent. And these are far from just simple little fables for kids. African oral literature is incredibly complex and nuanced. It gives us this profound, realistic lens into a specific cultural mindset, showing us exactly how millions of people have historically organized their reality, their humor, and their societal expectations. When you dive deeply into these tales, you find an incredible picture of African realism. These stories possess an uncompromising focus on the contemporary scene and the immediate physical environment. There's this fascinating, almost obsessive geocentrism at play. In these narratives, man doesn't usually fly up into the heavens to interact with the divine. Instead, the gods descend to earth. They lose their heavenly perfections to come down and deal with us, right here in the dirt. We vividly see humanized animal actors stepping up as heroes and tricksters in stories anchored entirely in survival and the daily, chaotic, earthly struggles of mankind. But traveling across the globe to Japan, we find a storytelling tradition that completely shifts our geographical and spiritual gaze. Instead of that earthy realism anchored purely in survival, Japanese folklore leans heavily into this breathtaking supernatural mysticism. This tradition is deeply and profoundly influenced by ancient Shinto and Buddhist beliefs. So it moves the narrative focus away from just the immediate physical dirt and leans heavily into the unseen world of nature spirits, divine intervention, and the complex invisible wheel of karma. Japanese tales use this vivid array of supernatural archetypes to impart their societal lessons. You have the kami, these sacred, powerful spirits that inhabit the natural world, demanding respect for the environment. Then there are the yokai, which is a vast, unpredictable umbrella of monsters and supernatural beings just hiding in the shadows. We encounter the kitsune, those deeply magical, often mischievous fox maidens who might specifically show up to punish a human's hidden greed or reward incredible kindness. And of course, the tengu, legendary mountain goblins with long noses who test a warrior's vanity. These aren't just spooky campfire creatures. They are deeply ingrained cultural enforcement mechanisms used to teach reverence for nature and the undeniable consequences of karma. When we put these two rich traditions head to head, the contrast in how they enforce societal values is absolutely stunning. Just consider the earthly, humanized hare of Africa. He is a trickster, navigating a tough, realistic world, representing a hyperfocus on man's immediate earthly fate and the cleverness required simply to survive the day. Juxtaposed directly against this, we have the ethereal, karma-driven fox maidens of Japan, representing a reality governed by supernatural mysticism and unseen magic. We're looking at two completely different geographical realities, yet both brilliant cultures engineered distinct regional motifs to teach their youth exactly how to behave, who to respect, and what to value. But here is where it gets crazy. Despite this massive geographical isolation, separated by vast, impassable oceans and entirely different environments, how do we make sense of the striking similarities in these stories? Enter the Arne Thompson Uther Motif Index. This thing is the ultimate skeleton key of folkloristics. It's a massive, comprehensive catalog used to classify and organize recurring narrative elements. What this index miraculously proves is that underneath the distinct regional paints of hares and fox maidens, all cultures share deep, underlying archetypes. It is a testament to the fact that we share the exact same imaginative architecture as human beings. The universality of our storytelling roots becomes undeniable when you break it down. Take the concept of magic animals. The overarching archetype remains completely identical whether a storyteller is describing a wonder-working buffalo out in the African savanna or a talking fox in a Japanese bamboo forest. We see identical warnings about breaking taboos, tales of unnatural cruelty, or the strict consequences of looking at something you were forbidden to see, which pops up in almost every society on Earth. And then there are transformations, the universal fascination with humans taking on animal forms, like graceful swan maidens or fearsome werewolves. We are essentially speaking the exact same underlying narrative language, just endlessly remixed. But oral traditions are inherently fragile, They vanish into the air. So let's track the pivotal, absolutely necessary transition from fleeting breath to permanent paper. Mapping how these oral performances were permanently cataloged reveals a race to preserve cultural identity. In 711 AD, the Kojiki Chronicle permanently locked the foundational Japanese myths into written text. Centuries later, by 1812, the Brothers Grimm published their first edition of tales in Germany, desperately trying to save their own local folklore. And even as late as the 1920s, traditions evolved into visual hybrids, like the massively popular Kamishibai paper dramas, which utilized beautifully illustrated boards to share these cataloged myths with enraptured local villages across Japan. However, the act of writing these stories down fundamentally changed them. The Brothers Grimm didn't just passively invent stories, they actively recorded raw, authentic voices from real working-class informants. One of these was Dorothea Wieman, a tailor's wife who sold vegetables at the local market. She provided the Grimms with unfiltered, brutally authentic reflections of a tough, unforgiving peasant life. But over several decades, figures like the Grimm brothers slowly sanitized these gritty tales. They systematically edited out the gruesome medieval brutality, transforming what were originally stark warnings for adults into safer, highly moralistic children's literature designed to cultivate a very specific, polite identity. The amazing thing, though, is that these ancient motifs haven't died out at all. They haven't been relegated to dusty museum shelves, they've simply changed canvases. The exact themes, monsters, and moral dilemmas we've discussed are heavily inspiring the vibrant modern media we enthusiastically consume today. Those ancient yokai and kitsune painted on aging Japanese scrolls are the direct ancestors of the creatures you see in today's global multi-billion-dollar anime and manga hits. The same archetypes fuel best-selling graphic novels and epic fantasy films, a trend effectively supercharged by the massive success of early cinematic adaptations like 1938's Snow White. The archetypes endure beautifully, just wrapped up in new, highly commercialized packaging. We end our globe-trotting explainer with a final, provocative thought. As you step away today, remember that you are not just an observer. You are an active, participating link in this ongoing chain of human cultural history. So, ask yourself, what stories will you pass down to the next generation? Because the narratives you choose to share, the heroes you choose to elevate, and the values embedded within them will undoubtedly shape the empathy and the identity of tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey of discovery.